order. Ask for a motion confirming the agenda. Deputy Reeve Campbell, Councillor Vodden, all in favor? Carried. Disclosure of pecuniary interest, if any. None noted. Okay. Moving forward, discussion. Dwayne, take it away.
Okay. Thanks, Reeve, Vincent, and members of council. So just I'm gonna come to the current, and then I'll take us back a little bit. At the June 4th regular meeting, which was a week ago tonight, council directed staff to contact the commissioner of the OPP and to communicate council's desire to reconsider the OPP's contract proposal and to request that the OPP resubmit the proposal or a version thereof for council's reconsideration regarding policing of the Wingham ward. So as directed, staff contacted the commissioner of the OPP on June the 5th, and on June the 7th, we were notified that the commissioner had granted the resubmission of the OPP's proposal, and the proposal was received later that same day. So at this time, I'd like to thank Commissioner Hawks for his consideration of council's request, and I'd also like to thank the OPP staff for their immediate and prompt response in providing the proposal in time for tonight's council meeting. The purpose of tonight's presentation is to compare the OPP's proposal with the Wingham Police Service numbers. For the benefit of those who are going to be seeing this for the first time, I have included a number of slides from my previous presentation just to assist with everyone's understanding. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those slides, but instead I'm going to focus on the substance of the presentation, which is a financial comparison between the OPP's proposal and the Wingham Police Service proposal. I have with me tonight Kabir Gill and Peter Marshall of the Municipal Policing Bureau, as well as Detachment Commander Jason Union. These gentlemen are here tonight to answer questions of council. So if there are any questions from the public, if they could be directed to myself. So in terms of the OPP resubmission, as I mentioned, the proposal or the resubmission was received on June the 7th. The resubmission that we received is the same one that was before council on March the 1st of 2018. And it's important to note that the staffing complement and the numbers in the proposal that were received on June the 7th is the same as those received on March the 1st. The reconsideration contract proposal is valid until July the 9th. So council has 30 days to make a decision, which is significantly less than the 6 months that council had been given when the original proposal had been received. So just briefly in terms of how did we get here? So on September of 2017, the OPP prepared and presented a contract policing proposal for council's consideration. On December of 2017, staff presented a financial analysis of 3 options for the Wingham policing, being policing by OPP, policing by the existing police service, and also to take the existing service and to expand it to include the Blythe and East Wallanosh wards. Later that same month, OPP billing model was explained. The OPP were able to explain that model to us in a little more detail, and as you'll see, it is important to understand how that model works. In January 2018, there was a public meeting that was held, an afternoon and evening session. Then there was some new information that came forward in the form of correspondence from the Wingham Police Association and the Wingham Police Chief. And subsequently, there was a second public meeting held in February. After consideration of the proposal and hearing the public's comments, council declined the OPP's proposal in March. And then last month, there was a discussion by council in terms of whether to continue to pursue expanding the Wingham service to include the Blythe and East Wallanosh wards. And council decided that council has decided not to pursue that any further. So that's in terms of where we're at today. So here's the motion that was passed on May 22nd. At the May 22nd meeting, basically that allows for council to reconsider their decision regarding the OPP contracting proposal offer. So in terms of just some things to think about as I go through this, essentially staff have identified kind of 4 different possibilities or options as we've termed them. And it's not suggesting here that it's one or the other. It could be option, you could pick 2 or 3 of them if you so wish. After you receive the presentation, council could consider directing staff to organize a public information session. Council could direct staff to ask the Wingam Police Services Board for more detailed one-time exit costs, and you'll see why that is an option when we get into more detail. Direct staff to prepare a report on options to finance those one-time exit costs. And option 4 is, if council so wished, as early as tonight, council could accept or decline the resubmitted OPP contracting proposal. So those are kind of some things to think about as we go through the presentation. So just for the benefit of those who perhaps seen this for the first time, through a service contract, the OPP would provide services to the Wingam Ward along with other municipal and provincial policing responsibilities and be under one administration. The proposal is based on level of policing services required to provide adequate and effective policing as set out in Regulation 3 of 99. The proposal is based on defined number of uniform and administrative personnel. And as I've indicated, the number of uniform administrative personnel has not changed from the proposal that council considered in March to the proposal that council has before it today. The administration would be provided at a renovated OPP detachment office in Wingam, but eventually be moved to a new detachment office in Clinton. So, in terms of OPP costing, the OPP costing proposal is a transition contract and it provides for 3+ years. Through an agreement. After the transition contract, the Wingam Ward would enter into the OPP billing model, which uses a different cost recovery methodology than the transition contract. So as I've indicated in terms of staffing with respect to the OPP proposal, you'll see here the proposal is for 0.08 of a detachment commander, 0.08 of a staff sergeant, one sergeant, 5 constables, 1 uniform position. Total uniformed officers would be 7.16 plus 1 detachment administrative clerk. So the total staff complement is 8.16, which is what the current staff complement that we currently have now, this is actually slightly higher than, I think it was 8.06 and now it's 8.16. So comparable. In terms of the Wingam Police Service, at the time that the initial proposal was being considered, we were looking at 8 positions. As a result of further discussions between the Wingam Police Association and the Wingam Police Services Board, those numbers have been changed. And you'll see in 2018, it has been increased from 8 staff up to 11 staff. And then you'll see in terms of 2019 and 2020, it's a further increase in our staffing complement. And I've just been informed that you'll see in 2019 and 2020, we have 10 constables. That actually should be 9, just as a point of correction. And the total staff would be actually 13. So contrary to the 14, it would actually be 13, which essentially is 5 new positions for the Wingam Police Service. But there would be some individuals currently in the service who'd move into different positions. But total additional staff complement would be 5 new officers. And maybe just one thing I'll mention, you'll see we have an inspector, we have a staff sergeant. There's been some terminology in the past that's been made reference to in terms of 2 staff sergeants or 2 sergeants. It would actually be 1 inspector and 1 sergeant. And again, those individuals would be from within the existing service. So moving on, just in terms of doing the financial comparison on the basis of 2019. The gross policing costs for the OPP contract is 1.28 million. There would be or is proposal a one-time adjustment of 13,566. There would be, as previously reported, some initial upfront capital costs around uniforms, equipment, and vehicles of 206,000. So the total for policing under OPP for 2019 would be approximately 1.482 million. In addition to that, there are one-time exit costs that need to be taken into consideration for council. You'll notice that in the previous proposal, it was around the $450,000 to $480,000 for the one-time exit costs. That was based on the service being assumed by the OPP in 2018. Now that we're not going, if council was to decide for the OPP to assume the service, those officers now have another year of service, and it's based on years of service, determines things around severance packages, for example. So what's happening is costs are increasing as we go through this process. When you factor in the 1.4 million plus the 500,000 in the one-time exit costs, again, that's estimated. We're looking 2019 of 1.982 million in that first year. In comparison, if you look at the Wingham service for 2019, the policing costs are 1.6 million. Building costs, we do, as previously reported, we do have to do some roof repairs and that to our existing policing building. They're estimated around 26,000. We also are looking at some capital costs around 41,000. There is then some revenues through some grants received from the Ministry of the Attorney General of 140,000. So the total for Wingham Policing Service in 2019 would be 1.5. So you'll see if we look at OPP 1.4 compared to Wingham 1.5, but when you add on your one-time exit costs, you're up around 1.9 million for the 2019 year. Just to speak into the one-time exit costs a little bit more detail, as I've indicated or alluded to, those costs would include things like severance packages, payout of any bank time that's been accumulated, possible benefits for up to a year. We would have to terminate our agreement for dispatch services. Potentially, we'd have to do a comparison. We may need to do some pension top-up. The estimated cost now is about 500,000. And it's important to note that staff have investigated this, and in terms of that financing, those one-time exit costs do need to be financed in the first year of the OPP transitional contract. At one point, there was a thinking on staff's part that perhaps we could do that over 2 or 3 years, but we've been informed that no, it has to be done during that transitional contract, and that's an accounting financial requirement. So looking at the 3-year transitional contract, so we're doing a comparison here between the Wingham service and the OPP, 2019, 2020, and 2021. So I've already gone through the 2019 numbers. If you look at the 2020 numbers, you'll see that the Wingham service goes from 1.591 to 1.7 in 2020 to 1.8 in 2021. So you're looking, 200,000 and then another 100,000 on top of that during that 3-year time period. In comparison, if you look at the bottom part of the chart, the OPP, use this, 1.4 million, then 1.3 million, and then 1.3 million as well. And what we did was we took this number, and then we've added on a 2% consumer price index has been applied to that. So that's why you see 1.4. Then there's some adjustments that take place, bringing it down to 1.3, and then you add on a 2%, it brings you up 1.34. You add on the one-time exit cost, 500,000. So during that 3 years, 1.9 for OPP, 1.3 in the second year, 1.3 in the third year. In comparison, Wingham is 1.5 in 2019, 1.7 in 2020, and 1.8 in 2021. Okay, so you're seeing a decrease here, a small increase. Here you're seeing increases. So after that 3-year transitional period, you go into the OPP billing model. And just for the benefit of those who are perhaps joining us for the first time, the billing model was implemented in 2015, and the billing model is provincially focused and divides the majority of the municipal policing costs into 2 categories: base service cost and a calls for service cost. I'm not going to go into any detail. I'm happy to, if anybody wants to talk a little bit about this further, but the base service cost essentially is it's a service that's provided, would be provided to the municipality. The current base service cost per property provincially is $191.35, and that's based on per property. The Wingham Ward has a property count of 1,561. So again, if we were to use 2017, we haven't created any properties. We're looking at a base service cost of $298,000 or $300,000 for round figuring. Then we do the OPP, under the OPP billing model, calls for service, and this includes situations where officers respond to calls and deal with situations and incidents as they arise. There is a tool available on the website that we as staff have used, and we have determined that our projected estimated cost for service would be about $446,000. So what we do then is we take our base service cost of around $300,000, add on the 446, 450, 744. Then we've also factored in some overtime costs of $60,000. There's a little bit of revenue that we would get through the Attorney General around court security and prison transport. So essentially, when we go into the OP billing model, after the 3 years, we're looking at around $800,000. And that's a number that we've seen before. In addition to the base cost and the calls for service costs, there are some additional costs that council can buy into if they so wish. For example, court security or enhancement or prisoner transport, or council decided that council wanted to have an officer at the high school all the time. You know, so there's some additional services that the municipality can purchase if they so wish. So then what we do is we looked at it again for over a 5-year time period. And you'll see 1.4, 1.3, 1.3. So these numbers you've seen before. Then when you go into the OP billing model, it drops to 800,000 in year 4, and then it goes down to 818 in year 5. And again, what we've done is we've taken the 801 and we've added on a 2% cost of living increase. In comparison, when you look at the Wingham service, we have 1.5, 1.7, 1.8. That's the 3 years of the transitional contract. In the 4th year, you're looking at 1.8 million. So you look at 800,000 here versus 1.8 million here. And then similar, you add on a 2% CPI, 1.884, and you're looking at 818,000 here. So again, another $1 million difference between those two. If you look at it over a 5-year time period, under the OPP proposal, we would be spending $6.2 million. Under the Wingham service for the same time period, and given the staffing complement of 5 additional officers or staff, we're looking at $8.9 million. If you average that over the 5 years, we would be spending $1.2 million per year over that 5-year time period. If we were to maintain the service, we're spending $1.7 million on average. So breaking this down in terms of properties, what would this mean for the property owner? Well, in the first year, given the property count, the property owner would be looking, again, this is an average, $949, sorry. And then we'd have to figure out how we're going to finance this. If we were to finance it through taxation, it would work out to about $320 per property. Moving on to year 2, it'd be $842. year 3, 859. But when you get into year 4, which is your billing model, it goes down to 514. And it's important to note that 514 is based on your base service and your calls for service. So the calls for service, you know, through public education and awareness, there is the potential that that 514 may drop lower, okay? It's based on your calls for service. So if your calls for service go down, then your cost per property owner goes down. Everybody's following.
They go up,
But
and
the
if they
reverse-
can
The
happen.
reverse can happen if you have more, if you know, yeah, it could be the reverse, but I think as a community, we're going to work towards driving our calls for service down, right? And then in year 5, it would go to 524, and again, this is simply a rate of adding on inflation. But again, if this number goes down, this number goes down accordingly. Okay. So now let's flip in terms of looking at the Wingham service. So these numbers we've already seen, we walked through those. 2019, we're looking at $1,019 per property, $1,136 in the second year, $1,160 in the third year, $1,183 in the fourth year, and $1,207 in the fifth year. So you're looking at these numbers. Whoop, 900, you know, dropping down to the 500 range, and then you're looking at these numbers, which are starting at 1,000 and going up. So if we do a 10-year comparison, and this actually really shocked us from a staff's perspective. So in terms of, these are the first 5 years that we've already talked about. Then what we've done is we've taken this and added on inflation, right, in these next 5 years. So you'll see that over the course of that 10 years, essentially $10,599 is what what the community would be spending for policing in the Wingham ward, which works out to $1,059, or sorry, $1,059,000 that we would spend on average per year over the 10 years. When you look at the Wingham service, okay, we've seen the first 5 years, then we add on 2% for the remaining 5 years, and it comes to 1.8 million. Okay, or 18 million works out to an average of 1.8 million per year. So when you look at the savings, there's a savings right from year 1. Save and except for your one-time exit costs. But then as you go through this, as you work this through, there's savings every year to the point that at year 10, you're saving 1.1 million. So in the course of that 10 years, policing would cost 8.3 million. Or your savings would be 8.3 million. 10 million if you were to decide to accept the OPP offer, 18 million with the Wingham Police Service. So your savings is 8.3, which on an average year is 831,000 that you would save annually. So other considerations for council, and council has seen this before, is the future of the Wingham Police facility. We have a building. We have to decide if we were to accept the OPP's proposal, what we would do with it. The ability to remain competitive and to recruit personnel. The future provincial requirements and standards, as they come out, we would have to meet those requirements with our existing service. There is no guarantee with the OPP billing model that it's not going to change positively or negatively. So we have the 3-year transitional contract. Year 4, we do see a significant decrease or savings, but there's no guarantee that that's going to actually, you know, occur in that 4th year. But the flip, it could be, there could be more savings. It's hard to say. We don't know. There's no guarantee. And the other consideration is the OPP may impose costs for services currently not billed to municipalities. So we currently receive services from the OPP that we currently do not get billed for. But the OPP does have the ability to charge for those if they so wished. But at the present time, the OPP are not charging for services that they're currently providing to us. So in terms of conclusions, there are savings with the OPP in the first 5 years. The OPP policing costs drop significantly under the OPP billing model in year 4, when the billing model comes into force. This results in significant savings over a 10-year comparison. The revised budget for the Wingham Police shows a significant increase from 2018 to 2020, which reflects the increase in the staffing of the 5 additional staff. Regardless of whether council was to accept the proposal offered by the OPP or whether council wished in terms of maintaining its decision regarding the existing service, there will be an increase in policing costs for the Wingham Ward for 2019. We know that. If the Wingham Police Service remains in service, the 2019 projected budget shows an additional increase of $257,000 over 2018, and there will be further increases in 2020, which we've already walked through. If the decision is made to accept the OPP contract policing officer, there are one-time exit costs that we've discussed for the Wingham Police Service, and we've determined and established that those would need to be financed in the first year of the OPP transitional contract. So going back to the options, again, these are not individualized. These are, you know, one, you can pick 1, 2, or whatever, or another option. But the options as we see them, you know, could be to direct staff to organize a public information session. Could ask staff to ask the Wingham Police Services Board. The $500,000 figure is estimated based on information that is available, but you know, we have to pin down that number to a little more precise. Once we have that number, could direct staff to do a report on options to finance that cost. It could be through taxation. And sorry, we previously talked about the municipality does have some money in reserves from Westerio. So council could consider and look at that to perhaps assist in offsetting some of those one-time exit costs. And as I've alluded to or mentioned, council can, as early as tonight, accept or decline the resubmitted OPP contract policing proposal that is currently before you. And that's it. And I'm happy to answer questions, or as I mentioned, we do have individuals here who from the OPP who are also available to answer questions of council.
Go to Councillor Sype.
Well, I just want to make a comment too about the comparisons and that has been mentioned here. So the Wingham Police Services budget is based on a calls for service that is relatively consistent from year to year. So we look at the calls for service and we look at the average with what has been in the past of the last 3 to 5 years. The chief looks at that, and when he presents his budget, that the complement is there's obviously fixed costs, but there's also obviously overtime and stuff when it comes to calls for services and court costs and all that other stuff. So when we're looking at a comparison of calls for service, when you're looking at the OPP billing model or in the future compared to what we currently have in the Wingham Police Service, it is significantly different because there's obviously a fixed cost with having your own service that we take into consideration. And that's one of the reasons why ultimately from a staffing perspective, as I've directed before, is the reason for the increase of the 5 officers was a collection of negotiations between the association and the Police Services Board to indicate that not every shift does the Wingham Police Service have 2 officers fully trained on staff every shift. So that is a requirement that we believe is not that isn't legislative, but it's a health and safety concern from a perspective of our officers. But also the fact is backup with regards to our officers. We can't be relying on the OPP that are in the surrounding Huron County area to utilize them as backup. That is not what their intention is. The intention is that we are be able to have backup in our own force. And that's really where this whole increase in complement of officers has come from. So it's not a matter of why can't we stay the way we've always been. That was a discussion between the association and the Police Services Board that we're not willing to accept the risks of that model anymore. So that was really the reason for the proposal that came here to council. And like I gotta say is that negotiation was very difficult during the time that we did. But at the end of the day, we brought it here to council prior to either the accepting or the declining of the original proposal. And that was one of the reasons why the negotiations were left, put in hiatus until the decision was made, because that was one of the reasons why we thought it was important that council, the association has thought it was better that the council and the staff all had the information and the public had the information about why we were doing what we were doing. And we believe that that has been provided.
Go to Councillor Vauden.
I'm very impressed with the proposal on the whole. It's very good. I have a couple of questions about some of the language that I'd like to clarify. The bottom of the second page of the summary, the executive summary, there's reference to the fact that community service programs considered may be implemented after consultation with the Wingham ward of the township. I'd like to know what you perceive as the Wingham ward that you would deal with on that time. Like, we don't see that as a separate legal entity, really. So I'm just wondering if you're talking about negotiating this with the council as a whole, or only with selected members of council.
Thank you, Councillor. In regards to that, what that basically means is if the proposal were to be accepted, we have our detachment commander here, Inspector Union's available as well. Any community-oriented events that you already have, any initiatives that the Wingham Police Service is already undertaking here, we would be honoring those with some of our own initiatives as well, but we're always open to new ideas. So you would still be maintaining a police service board here that would provide direction and would consult with our detachment commander. But at the same time, if council had a unique idea, whichever path you wish to choose to go, bringing that idea forward, Inspector Union would definitely entertain that, and then there would be consultation between the detachment as well as the Wingham ward as to what type of program or what issues are prevalent that we need to pay attention towards. So it's not as simple as just looking at community initiatives. It could be anything. Primarily, if there's a particular stop sign that's having too many issues, maybe schooling programs or speeders in the area, then if that's brought forward by any resident of the Wingham ward or by council through police service board, it would be open consultation with our detachment commander as well to look into those issues.
Okay, that,
I have one more that's somewhat related.
go ahead.
It's stated on the next page that the Huron County detachment will only accept criminal record and vulnerable sector check requests from residents of the Wingham ward of the township of North Huron. Why is that distinction being made between the Wingham ward and the other wards? Because of this contract, or?
You're correct. To answer your question very simply, is that's what the proposal is in relation to, is the Wingham Ward versus Blythe or East Wawanach. So we only take, as the OPP existing now, we only take and receive criminal record check requests or vulnerable sector checks from the areas that we police. So this is specifically in relation to the Wingham Ward, this proposal. So that's why it's addressed in that fashion.
So
that leads to my other question. What if I need a criminal record check? I'm from Blythe. We have an OPP service there. Are they providing that service, or?
We currently provide that service to all of the municipalities that are under contract with us, whether section 105.
So I don't really understand why the distinction here. That's fine.
Because of the proposal.
Yes, okay.
Deputy Reeve Campbell.
This is probably for the staff side. How many OPP do you have on staff during the day as compared to the night shift? Like you won't have equal day and night. I don't know.
So to pin down a number is not appropriate.
Okay.
So based on our analysis of the trends, whether they're criminal trends, whether they're traffic trends, whether they're community initiative trends, we may increase the amount of officers that we have during the day in a specific area, a specific time based on the specific need. So, there are times when we could have upwards of 20 officers working across Huron County. Depends on the type of circumstance. We rely heavily as well on our neighbors. When the bigger calls for service come in, we have very, very quick access to South Bruce, Middlesex, Perth County, Lambton County, really southwestern Ontario. So that provides us with the resources that we need in a moment of time, which you would have experienced last year, around the time that we delivered this proposal, when your police service of choice was involved in an incident, and the OPP provided a significant amount of resources in a short period of time to assist not only the Wingham Police Service, but to assist with our investigation as it related to that incident in an OPP jurisdiction.
No, I'm just meaning on a day-to-day basis. Like, do you have 4 officers on at night, on a day? Nothing.
So each platoon has between, and it all fluctuates, but between 10 and 14 members. That fluctuates based on parental leave, based on vacation, based on however we do use our human resources when we feel that we're shorthanded, whether that's on overtime or creating, again, borderless policing, so it doesn't cost municipalities overtime. We'll bring in others as we see.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sykes.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up to Councillor Vaughan's comment about what level of, like, if there's any different levels of service or whatever. So the Police Services Board would dictate that question. If council were to come to the Police Services Board or send something to the Police Services Board and say, we would like to see a significant change in a level of service regarding schooling or whatever the case may be. The Police Services Board would then look at that no different than we would look at under an OPP scenario, where we would send that to the detachment commander under the OPP scenario, where currently we would send that to the chief to see what we could do from a resources perspective on how we manage that. So how the way I interpret or the way I understand it, the Police Services Board the functionality of the Police Services Board doesn't change irregardless of whether it's the Wingham Police Service or the OPP. The police service, other than the fact that technically the Police Services Board wouldn't have any employees, they would still have the right to send them messages or communicate to the OPP that says, we want to see something like this, or how does this work, or what, and get that information so that we can relay back to the council about what the service really looks like from a day-to-day perspective. So that's the kind of thing where the Police Services Board need doesn't change. That's still a requirement, and ultimately, in my eyes, is I would like to see the Police Services Board change in the fact of its complement of who sits on it. But that's for another day, because it's different than the Wingham Ward. But the purpose of the North Huron Police Services Board or the Wayne Police Services Board would be the same functionality, whether it's the Wayne Police Service or the OPP.
Councillor Witz-Mitaninga.
So we have a timeline of July 9th. What happens if we decide not to, we decline your offer again and we miss that deadline? So then where does all that, what's the next steps? How does that look going forward in the future?
So initially you were given, in every municipality is the same thing. They get 6 months to decide whether they accept or reject our costs. And so in March 1st, March 5th, March 5th, you're rejecting the costing. Of course, other matters have come up since then. And that request was made through the commissioner to reinstate or revisit the costing proposal. So as a result, the commissioner has given you 30 days to make your decision. If the 30 days comes and goes and there is no decision made or you reject that, then at that point in time, any other request for an OPP costing proposal will start right from the very beginning again. So that's a letter to the ministry, and then we come back out, we do all our assessments from that sort of. So essentially starting all over again. This is just allowing this process to continue where it left off. It's not one that's given out every any means. It was just a courtesy expressed by the commissioner just to help everybody out.
Councillor Hallahan.
I don't know whether you can answer this one for me, but I as of now, we're not being charged extra for any extra resources if you communicate something very serious to the community. Either the East Monash Ward or the Wayne Ward as far as that right now.
Well,
Is that right?
Well, we provide policing, right?
Yes.
Already provided in
Right.
East Wabanach.
Yes.
So certainly your calls for service will dictate, plus the base service will dictate how much that cost of policing is. When you talk about Wingham proper, the ward of Wingham, so if your chief decides he wants the OPP to come in, then there's no cost at this point for that request.
This is what's kind of got me a little concerned in the fact that it was something very serious. And then in Chief Poole's letter that we got was, something very serious. We don't want to get into where it's going to bankrupt the municipality or extra costs, and that's what was in this letter that we got. Now, I'm wondering is there any legislation coming forth, maybe you can answer this, that costing might come? You understand?
Councillor, to answer your question there, currently the OPP provides assistance to other police services, and we don't charge for them right now. Just to the incident, for example, that Inspector Union was referring to last year around the proposal time. You saw all the different resources came in, but not a dime was charged. Legislation does exist that we can go back for cost recovery, but the commissioner has opted not to do that at this point. That's why when we give our proposal, we also mention the fact is, could that change tomorrow? Absolutely, it could change. We don't know that. But right now, legislation does exist to go back for a cost recovery. The terminology used in Chief Poole's letter is his own terminology and how he would think it, yes. So right now, we do provide that service at no cost, but if the municipalities that are policed by the OPP, should that change tomorrow, but any municipality being policed by the OPP in regards to having the resources still coming in will still be free. Because it is our service providing policing services to that community. Regardless of the amount of resources required, we would be providing those still at zero cost recovery.
Thank you. Councillor Simon.
Yeah, so based on Chief Poole's letter, that his letter basically stated that there isn't technically currently right now legislation that said they could charge us back, but there is no guarantee that they wouldn't potentially affect you later back in 5 years or 10 years or whatever. Nobody can predict the future, but what legislation is going to potentially. His comment was to the incident 5 or 6 years ago when it was a homicide that we had in the town. So in the issue where if that legislation and the commissioner has decided not to do cost recovery, but if he changes his mind or she changes his mind to say, yes, we're going to do cost recovery, the municipality has no has no basis to stop that cost. They send it to us, we issue the check. That we don't have that right unless we are not going to take that service from the OPP and do those investigations in-house, which to be quite frank, we don't have the resources for that type of investigation. We have the training and the capacity to do that kind of investigation. But for day-to-day operations, we do not have the resources for that type of investigation going forward.
Deputy Reeve Campbell.
Just a comment, with OPP and the Wingham Police Service, really work well together. There's times you have called for our fellows for backup, there's times, it's always worked well together. And I don't think it would discontinue that at this point unless we decide to go to OPP, but just for the public's sake, they have really worked well together. And it's never been an issue that I know of. And I said on the police service work real well too, but it's always been well communicated.
Councillor Syke.
So I did also want to one of the assumptions in the contract, or one of the assumptions in the Wingham Police Services numbers, was a 2% cost increase on each year that from a cost perspective, inflation. That's I would suggest that is as conservative as it's going to get, based on the fact that each negotiation is different every time we go about a negotiation with the association. So it could be 2%, it could be 0.5%, it could be 5%. Nobody knows what that negotiation looks like based on the need or the assessment of what the ward looks like. That's the one thing that I think we have to be cognizant of, is that, yeah, we have, as a police services board, we do have the chance to negotiate, but when it comes to the size of the service that we have, there's certain things that we just can't negotiate. Public safety or health and safety of our employees is imperative. Number one, the police services board of the municipality, if they're not doing what's in the best interest from a WSIB and from a health and safety related case comes up, if there's an incident where there's a death or whatever the case may be, there's bigger problems in the world that we could be potentially having if we don't do that thing correctly. And that's where I think currently right now, where the police services board is sitting at, is we just weren't willing to risk that potential issue with, we want to make sure that our officers go home and imperative that they do that and do so. So that is where that cost has come from. But I did want to make sure that don't kid yourself, or council shouldn't kid themselves that it's going to be 2%, because we have no idea what that negotiation looks like in 2 years.
Okay, is there any other questions or comments from council? Is there anything that council has that has thoughts towards a direction to take from tonight's meeting? Councillor Vaughan.
If it's appropriate, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the proposal presented by the OPP. That's my motion.
Deputy Reeve Campbell.
I would second that motion, but I'd like to see option 3 put on with that we direct our staff to report any options to finance the one-time exit cost.
I would include that in my motion.
Okay. Second motion.
Councillor Ritzman-Daninga.
I don't think we should. I think we should look at other options. I think there are other municipalities around us that would like to contract our police service, and I think we haven't looked at all of those options yet, and we should be.
Okay. I know that there is municipal reps from other municipalities have asked about the possibility. It has to be a continuous service though. It can't jump over. And some of those other municipalities have also told me, no, they're not interested in being part of that. Personally, I think we need to nail down what the one-time wind-down costs would be to a more accurate number. There's a motion that's been suggested and a small addition. I do not have a seconder for that at this.
I second.
Yes, it's
You are
With the adding
seconding.
on of option 3.
Excuse me, Reeve Vincent. So just for council's information, if you are selecting option 3, you may wish to consider option 2 because that request will have to come through the Police Services Board for those costs in order for staff to prepare that report.
I don't have a problem with that.
No, I don't know.
Councillor Ritzman-Daninga.
We have until July 9th, and I just think we just need to not make a rash decision, because we do that and then we flip back and then we make a new one. Let's sit with this, let's have some discussions with our neighboring municipalities, look at all the options. We have until the 9th, we've got a month. We don't have to decide tonight.
Deputy Reeve Campbell.
To Councillor Ritzman-Daninga, all the neighboring municipalities all know what we're going through, and not one of them have come to council to say anything. We can't go on hearsay, no say. If they wanted the option to be part of this, they should be sitting here at this table, bringing the option to us.
Councillor Syed.
And to be quite fair, the Police Services Board hasn't heard anything from either of them either. So the Police Services Board, if there was a request or a request from another municipality for potential level of service, that would come to us. That will come to us no different than we would change the level of service within the municipality of North Huron within the William Ward. We have not heard from anybody from a council perspective, from our neighbors or what. And one of the things that we have to be careful of is what Reeve had mentioned, is that it has to be a continuous service. We can't, the wards of East Walnut and Blythe have made it very perfectly clear, they don't want the William service. So if whatever municipality is around those areas, we can't pick and choose those ones, because if they drive through those two wards, it's very difficult or non-existent able to provide it. What I will say is I don't disagree with what Councillor Ritzman is saying. However, the issue is that those municipalities have not asked. They've not asked. They've not even garnered even thought of coming and asking us. And they currently have the OPP. So what does that tell me? That tells me either they're happy with the service they're getting and they don't want to do anything, or they're waiting for somebody to give them a real good deal, and is it going to be a really good deal? That's the question I don't think that we have. And to be quite fair, July the 27th, we're in lame duck. We don't, and July 8th, 30 days, these conversations, if we were going to have them with other municipalities, should have started last February. or before. And we haven't had any, and this motion about having a discussion about costing has been on the docket with this municipality for 2 years. So we couldn't, until the costing came from the OPP, we couldn't talk about any of the other ones. But we haven't had anybody since the proposal was presented to come to us and say, oh, by the way, we'll look at your service the way you have it now. So I just don't think that we're going to gain anything from having that discussion or even opening up that, because all they're going to be looking for is the deal of the century, and we're not going to be willing to provide it.
Councillor Vaughn.
There's another point that I'd like to make here regarding the winding down costs. Those costs are going to be what they're going to be. We have a rough idea of what they will be. Whether we spend another period of time trying to pin it down to something more carefully developed, we're going to have to pay it anyway. So I'd say let's not delay any longer. Let's, for once, move ahead quickly and get this on the road, because the time is fleeting.
Deputy Reeve Campbell.
As our clerk has said, we need to have option 2 as part of that motion to ask the police service board for those figures. I have no problem just putting that as part of the motion.
As long as they can do it quickly and accurately.
Councillor Knott.
It's become painfully obvious at the public meeting when everyone was there. I said at the time that those who had expressed opinions and called me or sent me emails with regard to this situation had indicated that they wanted the Wingham Police Service regardless of cost. And I asked that question very specifically at the last public meeting, if that was true. And got an affirmative. But it has become patently obvious that now you realize the actual costs, you weren't prepared to pay that bill. And I think it would be remiss of us not to put an end to this now. This has gone on long enough. I think that in the interest of getting on with the whole process, it is time to now put the final nail in the coffin. And tonight, this council should make a decision. And I'm afraid I know which way that decision is going to go. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I think it has to go that way in order for the municipality to move on. There are a lot of other issues that we need to take care of, and will need to be done by not just this council in the last 30 days, but in your next council for the next 4 or 5 years. And worrying about this entire policing subject is not one of the things that should be occupying your time. You're going to have a lot bigger issues to deal with. So I think the time has come for us to put the vote.
Any other points of discussion?
Am I allowed to speak?
No, that it's just council and staff and the OPP. That, sorry that it's not part of the process. That I believe it should be a recorded vote.
Yes.
Councillor Hallahan.
Read the motion, please.
Motion reads that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby accept the OPP contract policing proposal for the Wingham Ward prepared by Collier Diol and dated June 11, 2018, and further that the North Huron Police Services Board is requested to prepare and provide to council detailed exit costs for the Wingham Police Service, and further that staff are directed to prepare a report regarding options to finance one-time exit costs for the Wingham Police Service.
That covers it. Okay, Richard, proceed.
Deputy Reeve Campbell,
Yes.
Councillor Hallahan,
Yes.
Councillor Knott,
Yes.
Councillor Vaughn,
Yes.
Councillor Syke,
Yes.
Councillor Ritzman-Taninga,
No.
Reeve Vincent,
Yes,
carried.
I declare that motion carried. Move to the road commission. Moving to the confirmation bylaw, do I have a mover? Deputy Reeve Campbell, seconded by Councillor Knott. All in favor? Carried. Okay. Motion for adjournment. Councillor Vauden, Councillor Hallahan, all in favor? Carried.